Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and the Pokemon GO World Championships are only 1 week away. I'm going to be working this event live in person as one of the official commentators for Worlds, and that means over the next week, I really got to lock in, focus, and learn my matchups. That does mean, unfortunately, running a bunch of Pokemon that I typically don't like to run, including the subject of today's video, Marowak. Today's video aims to answer a pretty simple question. Why are so many top players and Worlds competitors suddenly using Non Shadow Marowak? Non Shadow Marowak, even when Mudslap was good, was deemed an absolute joke, so why is it suddenly surging in popularity? Today's team, I'm pairing up Marowak with Lickilicky, another Pokemon that I really don't run too often, and on the lead, I'm running a Pokemon that I very much like running, and that is Tinkaton. In the first match, we pick up a pretty nice lead, leading Tinkaton into Galarian Corsola. My Tinkaton is very bulky, so I should be able to withstand the Astonishes, back-to-back Nightshades, and make it to a second Gigaton Hammer. However, I don't really want to play out this matchup the whole way. Instead, I'm just going to farm up, go for the catch, and get the catch and sneak of the Nightshade onto Lickilicky where it's double resisted. That Nightshade does absolutely nothing. In comes Carbink, and unfortunately, this is an absolutely atrocious matchup for Lickilicky. You can see from the Shadow Ball damage, this Carbink does not care about what Lickilicky has to say, and I'm just going to keep farming as they fire off a move. I know that I'm always going to be able to tank whatever they throw here, even if they do full send the Moonblast. By catching a move earlier, it desynced the switch timers, so now I can bank a ton of energy and then get Marowak on the field. I think that a healthy Marowak up a lot of energy could potentially pose problems for my opponent. So they fire off the Moonblast, I put up the shield, and they're going to pivot back into the Galarian Corsola. I know as the Non Shadow Marowak, I am very bulky, but I also don't do a lot of damage. That Bone Club will not put them into 2-hit KO range, so I'm just going to overfarm, put up the shield, and then Mudslap them into a range where Bone Club could deliver a knockout. I want to ensure that I have as much residual energy as possible, because that's going to make it very annoying for whatever my opponent decides to bring in here. We know they're not bringing in the Carbink. It's going to have to be that mystery Pokemon in the back, which is revealed to be a Shadow Bug-Bite Fortress. Fortress will take some pretty considerable damage from the Bone Club. Bone Club is going to land. Now I'm going to go for the harder hitting Rock Slide. My opponent kind of can't afford to shield this. I have a ton of energy stored everywhere. Rock Slide is going to land, and now I can farm up, switch into the Lickilicky, and snipe them with the Body Slam. Body Slam is going to be pressuring away the final shield, and I still have a Bulldoze banked on the Tinkaton, so I can bring back in the Tinkaton, fire off the Bulldoze, and all they're going to have left is a Carbink that doesn't have any residual energy. Back in comes the Carbink, opponent sees the writing on the wall, and concedes the match. We move to game number 2, picking up the Dream Lead Tinkaton into Thievul. My opponent safe switches into Shadow Kanto Ninetales, and I'm going to respond with Marowak. Now, one of the reasons I immediately realized why the Non Shadow Marowak could be beneficial is this exact scenario. If you bring in a Shadow Marowak into a Shadow Kanto Ninetales, you're going to get one-shot by an Energy Ball, but the Non Shadow Marowak can always hang on here. I'm able to no-shield the Energy Ball, and my opponent can never Ember me down. They will, however, outpace if I try and go for good timing, so I'm forced to fire off the Bone Club on alignment due to the fact that I was slightly slow on my switch-in. Bone Club will connect, switch advantage has been secured, and back in comes Thievul. Thievul will be answered with the Tinkaton in the back is Jellicent, and my opponent didn't really have a save switch for their team, and they get punished by getting insanely hard countered. We pick up a very good lead in the next match, Tinkaton into Shadow Kingdra. My opponent safe switches into a Non-Shadow Celio, and this is a bit of a problem. I don't have an amazing answer to a Non-Shadow Celio. Specifically, the Non-Shadow Celio is played because it wins the ones into Tinkaton. Most Celios do like to shield the first, so I decided to go for a diabolical Bulldoze bait, pulling a shield and a defense drop. Now I feel a lot more comfortable about bringing in the Lickilicky. Non-Shadow Surf will still chunk, Celio does hit surprisingly hard, but because the defense is lowered, this Shadow Ball, it's not going to take the knockout, but it's going to inflict some pretty massive damage. Shadow Ball is going to land, Celio barely able to hang on, and back in comes the Shadow Kingdra. Kingdra will not get a farm down before I'm able to make a Shadow Ball into a Body Slam, so my opponent should go for the CMP tie here with a Swift. Therefore, I can actually punish this play by a predictive switch into the Tinkaton. Tinkaton more than happy to absorb a Swift, that's not going to be a problem, and now I have a stored move on that Lickilicky for later, and I can go for a one-shield farm down with Tink. This way, Tinkaton is going to exit up a ton of energy. I still haven't revealed the Marowak, and I have a ton of energy on that Lickilicky as well. It turns out I'm not even going to need any of it, because in the back, it is Charjabug, and Charjabug will get absolutely deleted by the Marowak. The Non Shadow Marowak, while it doesn't really do a lot of damage, it is shockingly bulky, so I can fire up the Gigaton, pressure away the shield, bring in the Marowak, opponent sees the writing on the wall, and concedes the match. We move to the next match, leading Tinkaton into Shadow Annihilape, and we're going to have to check the fast move here. This Annihilape is rocking Low Kick, and that is actually very scary. Well, it would have been, but my opponent actually doesn't build up to threaten a close combat. I'm more than happy to no-shield a Rage Fist, but then I realized that these boosted low kicks are doing a lot of damage. I am of the belief that low kick Annihilape is the strictly superior moveset to run in this current meta, and I will have a video coming out in a few days that showcases an insanely strong low kick Shadow Annihilape team. Although what I will say is I am not running close combat, and I'm not running Ice Punch as the secondary charge move. I think there is a different secondary charge move that is a lot better for low kick Annihilape that was just absolutely destroying entire teams. In this scenario, even without Bulldoze debuffs, we're barely able to hang on. My opponent never building up to threaten the close combat means that I'm able to win the lead. My opponent actually gets a very scary farm down as in comes Florges, and I am very soft to a Florges up energy once Tinkaton has been removed. So I get to bring in the Licky Licky, they Chilling Water, and I'm going to throw the Shadow Ball, terrified of a catch, but no catch comes through. A debuff Shadow Ball, it's not going to two-shot, but it will do some pretty solid damage onto this Florges. The good news is I should be able to survive 2 more Chilling Waters here. If they Disarming Voice, it could get a little bit scary. But they're not on DV, they're on Moonblast. I fire off the Shadow Ball, they catch it onto a Carbink, and this game should be over. A Shadow Ball doesn't do anything on a Carbink, but now I just get to bring in the Marowak, and Marowak just gets to absolutely shred through this Carbink's hopes and dreams. I'm going to fire off this Bone Club. Bone Club's not going to knock out, but it will put them into easy farm down range. And a Moonblast, not really something that's ever going to threaten the Marowak. So they fire off the Moonblast. That doesn't do a lot of damage, but they actually end up getting an attack drop. That could be a little bit scary, as now my opponent has the Chilling Water. However, even though they survive this with the attack drop, I can get the catch into the very low HP Licky Licky, and that's going to secure the win. For a moment, a door was opened by that attack drop, but luckily we get the catch. All's well that ends well, and we still get the win. Hey, speaking of Florges, we see it on the lead in the next match. Tinkaton into Florges. My opponent safe switches into a Volt Switch Fortress. And oh my goodness, this is not a safe switch. We get to send in the Marowak, and Marowak is just going to obliterate this Pokemon. Fortress is an Earthquake, and it's just not going to matter. Marowak's matchup is far too dominant. I get to fire off the Bone Club. Bone Club looks like it will be able to pick up the 2-hit KO with a couple extra Mud Slabs, so my opponent is never going to be able to make it to a second Earthquake. The Bone Club will land, we will get the full farm down. Their Switch Clock comes up, and they're able to save it and bring in the Florges. Florges can debuff the Tinkaton, but the fact that Tinkaton does not have to shield any of the first 2 charge stacks here means that Florges is just in absolute dire straits. The only lose con I see in this moment is having a bait called, so we full send Gigaton, they call the bait, and they get one shot. At this point, they're going to have to bring in the final Pokemon. They can't bring back in the Fortress. They actually do bring back in the Fortress, but this is not an Earthquake. This is only a Rock Tomb. I do not have to respect this. Rock Tomb not going to do much. In the back is going to be another low kick Annihilape, and I'm going straight for the Gigaton Hammer. Gigaton is going to be no-shielded. I can just stay in. They should throw right before the Bulldoze, so I can actually go for a catch of the Rage Fist onto my Licky Licky. Now, this seems like kind of an insane play, switching a Licky Licky into a fighting type, but I should still be in a very good spot. Even if they end up close combating me, that's fine, because then I can just mud slap them down with the Marowak. They end up just going for the Rage Fist, and I can just go straight Body Slam. Body Slam is double resisted, but they're just way too low. They end up no-shielding. They realize there's just no way out. The Licky Licky is too far ahead, and they will concede the match. We've got a very tough opponent in the next match, the brand new 2026 NAIC champion, Cyrino. We pick up a very good lead though, Tinkaton into Shadow Pidgeot. Gigaton Hammer would pick up the 1-hit KO, so I will go for a Diabolical Bulldoze bait. The Bulldoze does get the debuff as well. He farms up a massive amount of energy. Brave Bird would not take the knockout here, so I decide I'm going to let it go, just for it to be a Heat Wave, and that is a very big problem. He does make an amazing catch though, waiting the turn, catching that Gigaton Hammer onto Corsola, but now I can bring in Licky Licky. Licky Licky obviously has a dominant matchup into Corsola. I'm fine taking a Power Gem. I just want to farm up to 100 and then fire off the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball will be securing the knockout and will make sure that I have a lot of residual energy for whatever he decides to bring in here. So Shadow Ball is going to land. Corsola gets KO'd. He can't really afford to bring in the Pidgeot because Pidgeot would not appreciate the rollouts. So he's going to bring in his final Pokemon, which is Marowak. Here, I do make a pretty big error. I shouldn't have farmed back up to 100 energy. I should have thrown before that because that is pretty inefficient. And I pivot into the Marowak to bait back out the Pidgeot. It's very important that I bait back out the Pidgeot because I can use the Licky Licky to get rid of the Pidgeot, and I have a move banked as well. So Pidgeot will hit the field. I have to respect a potential Brave Bird. It is just going to be the Air Cutter, and now I can full send the Rock Slide. Rock Slide will be hitting for quite a lot of damage onto the Pidgeot. Pidgeot's forced to burn the final Protect Shield. This is going to be close. They can't get the farm down. They're forced to fire off energy, and I should have a guaranteed win condition. I can throw one rollout, fire off the Body Slam, and it should KO, but I get one turn bring in lag, and it ends up being a CMP tie. One of the many reasons I will not be sad when the old system goes away in a week or so, because my goodness, the one-turn bring and lag gets so incredibly old, and unfortunately now it comes down to trying to call a catch. I try and get the catch, I do not get it, and I will end up losing the game. Had I been able to get the Body Slam one turn before the Pidgeot as I was supposed to, then I would have had a shield, I don't have to switch, and I can just knock out with the Shadow Ball, so a very unfortunate end to a very fun game. GG's to Rhino. Well, we get the same lead as before in the next match, leading into a Pidgeot. I'm assuming this one does not have Heat Wave because they pivot out immediately and they send in Corsola. Pidgeot plus Corsola, back-to-back games. Kind of odd, but you know what? We are very strong into Corsola, so I bank a ton of energy on the Tinkaton and then bring in Licky Licky. Licky Licky will get to fire off the Shadow Ball. This time, the Corsola was not chipped, so I will need back-to-back Shadow Balls if I want to secure the knockout. But I'm really not too worried about back-to-back Power Gems. It's not like Corsola has any kind of meaningful pressure here, and I fire off the Shadow Ball right away because I just simply do not want to give them an opportunity to catch back out onto the Pidgeot. In comes the Pidgeot. I'm never going to have an opportunity to throw this Body Slam on good timing, so I just throw it on alignment. We get 3 rollouts, we get a Body Slam, that's some pretty decent damage onto the Pidgeot, and now I can bring in the Tinkaton. Here I end up throwing 2, playing into a CMP tie, because if it's Brave Bird, I do want to incentivize them to no shield. I want them to let the Pidgeot go, because Marowak does not want to see Pidgeot, but they're not going to let it go. Instead, they're going to send in an XXS Tiny Diggersby as their final Pokemon. I've seen a lot of extra small Pokemon before, but I don't think I've ever seen the Diggersby. That is absolutely hilarious. The good news for me is that Diggersby does not have strong enough neutral matchups to be able to win this game. I can just chip away with the Bone Clubs. The Bone Clubs don't really do anything, but the Scorching Sands aren't hitting too hard either. Now, Diggersby, I think, is a very interesting case study. It is a Pokemon that, in a vacuum, should be pretty strong. It's a good Pokemon with good movesets and stats, but it's pretty bad in this current Open Grade League meta. There's just so many Pokemon that just absolutely destroy Diggersby that unfortunately, outside of RPS and Corsola, it doesn't really have a place. And we're able to fire off the Rock Slide there, predicting the catch, so Pidgeot ends up getting KO'd. But it's a bit of a tragic tale to be a Diggersby right now. Diggersby, it just doesn't really have the targets. And if you're trying to RPS Corsola, then Licky Licky just does that job, but strictly better. Now, one could argue this team is pretty soft to Diggersby as a whole, but Diggersby isn't even that strong at a Tinkaton, which is insane. But I guess that just shows the insane power of Tinkaton. We pick up a very awkward lead in the next match, Tinkaton into Shadow Aslash. Now, Shadow Aslash does have very strong neutral play to this entire team. Trollrun will hit for big super effective damage, and I'm just going straight for the Gigaton. I want to try and get damage on the Aslash. Anytime you see an A-Slash lead, they're probably not going to be weak to the Marowak in the back, but if there's ever a chance that they could be weak, I want to try and play for switch advantage. So I will put up the shield as they go for the drill run and get a full farm down. My opponent sends in Jellicent, and I feel that I'm in an incredible amount of danger. Even though I have a very strong answer to Jellicent, I can't really afford to pivot out, because if I do, then I end up losing switch advantage. But by staying in, my opponent's just going to be no-shielding all the Gigatons, recognizing there's probably a good answer to Jellicent due to the fact that I'm staying in, and they're going to save all their shields for their final Pokemon. I bring in the Licky Licky, they fire off the Surf, and I'm just going to be blind switching into the Marowak. Marowak is going to be met with a Fearow, and this game is unfortunately over. Even if I had stayed in with the Licky Licky, there's just simply no way to win this. The Marowak, as expected, is dead weight in the back. I think what I had to do in this game was actually end up not playing for switch advantage. Had I just let the Tinkaton go and then gone for a rollout down with Licky Licky, Licky Licky was very good into their backline, but unfortunately, I did make the misread. I prioritized switch advantage over prioritizing like a farm down, and that unfortunately ended up burning me, as they had a very effective Pokemon for sponging energy from that Tinkaton in the Jellicent. They correctly no-shielded the Jellicent as well, recognizing that they could just save all shields for Fearow, and then Fearow just did way too much damage out of the team. Back in comes Jellicent, knocking me out with the Surf. GG's to my opponent there, very well played, and we're just going to top left as we bring back in the Marowak. We move to the final game, Tinkaton into Guzzlord. Guzzlord is a Pokemon that I think is genuinely unviable right now. My opponent safe switches into the Jellicent, and we get to send in Licky Licky. Clearly, my opponent likes Pokemon that are not particularly flexible. We have a Jellicent and a Guzzlord, and they're just in a very, very rough spot. But let me expand on why I think Guzzlord is unplayable. I think the Guzzlord, meta conditions earlier in the season were a little bit better for it, but it is in such a rough spot. Tinkaton is on almost every team, and as opposed to other dark types that if you give them at least some kind of small energy advantage, there's a world in which they could flip Tinkaton Tinkaton. Guzzlord, you could give it 2 shields at 100 energy, and it's never beating Tinkaton. That's just how dominant of a matchup it is. Even with Sludge Bomb, there's just nothing you can do. Sludge Bomb, Brutal Swing, Tinkaton just simply does not care. And because of that, in my eyes, it's really not a Pokemon that's worth playing. Because if you ever end up on Tinkaton, then you just have a Pokemon that is just complete dead weight. There's not really anything that it can do. My opponent does end up getting 1-turn bring in here as they bring in their own Tinkaton. I still throw on what should be good timing had they knock out the 1-turn, so that way they don't get disadvantaged in any way. But either way, they're at enough of a disadvantage having a Guzzlord on their team, and we just have the Marowak for this Tinkaton, so we bring in the Marowak. They end up waiting the turn to see what came in there, so we end up getting a Mudslap Sneak, Tinkaton Hammer, easy survive for that Marowak, and my opponent is going to resign the match. This video began with a question: why are so many top players and Worlds competitors suddenly using the Non Shadow Marowak? And well, after playing it myself for quite a few sets and going very positive, I went 11 wins, 5 losses with this iteration of the team in the 3200s, I feel like I was able to find some answers. I feel like a lot of these top players, when they try and figure out what to put on their team, they start with taking a look at the existing usage. And the Pokemon that are dominating the usage right now are Pokemon like Shadow Kanto Ninetales, Tinkaton, and Licky. In theory, all Pokemon that should struggle against ground types. The problem is, to be frank, there's a ton of really bad ground types that don't actually beat those Pokemon. One could argue for a Pokemon like Diggersby that's seen great meta play before, except it cannot reliably counter-switch a Shadow Kanto Ninetales and win the matchup. Diggersby also can very easily have switch advantage flipped by Licky if Licky's up even just the tiniest amount of energy. I believe Licky straight up wins the 2s against Mudshot Diggersby, and Diggersby isn't even that consistent into Tinkaton. You have a Pokemon like Unova Stunfisk, very consistent into Tinkaton, but Stunfisk gets absolutely thrashed by Shadow Kanto Ninetales, and Stunfisk doesn't actually even end up having a very consistent matchup into the Licky. And so it goes. Seismitoad, very good into Licky and Tink, gets obliterated by the Ninetales. So you very quickly end up cycling through a bunch of different ground types. Even a Pokemon like Clodsire can't reliably beat Tinkaton, which is insane. I've been the Clodsire. I've tried to beat Tinkaton. It is incredibly infuriating when you just consistently end up losing that matchup the moment the Tinkaton is up just the tiniest little bit of energy. So, in their search for a Pokemon that could actually have play into all 3, they tried the Shadow Marowak, but Shadow Marowak was just getting one-shot by Ninetales Energy Balls. They ended up settling on a bulky ground type that is fast move pressure, and that is the Non Shadow Marowak. The Non Shadow Marowak plays exceedingly differently to how the Shadow did back in the day. The Shadow, you could reliably trust that its energy would always go everywhere due to the fact that with the Shadow status, its energy actually hit pretty hard. However, as the Non-Shadow Marowak, your energy does not hit particularly hard in neutral matchups. It's more so a Pokemon that you try and play zeros with. A Pokemon that can reliably take hits, deal out some damage, and utilize the fact that a lot of the meta is weak to its ground typing. It also has Rock Slide. Rock Slide can pick up 2-hit KOs on Pokemon like Mantine, but if you're stuck against a Jump Bluff, that Rock Slide is actually going to miss the 2-shot without you being the Shadow. So I think after a lot of gameplay today, we were kind of able to solve it. Why are people running the Non Shadow Marowak? Well, the top usage is all weak to ground types, but all the ground types are pretty terrible. And in a weird way, this ends up being one of the most effective Pokemon at dealing with that trio of Licky, Tink, and Shadow Kanto Ninetales. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed watching today's video, please do help support the channel. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and an extra special thank you as always to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide to the channel is so appreciated. So thank you guys so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.